Lowering insulin and reversing insulin resistance is simpler than you think, and it all starts with the food on your plate. And I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. You don't have to be super restrictive in order to get results. What you eat is just as important as what you don't eat. But with that said, I'm not gonna bullshit you. I'm not one of those people who preaches everything in moderation. That might sound good in theory, but it rarely works. So stick around if you're serious about reversing insulin resistance, because I'm gonna be giving you the top 100 foods you can eat to lower your insulin levels naturally and improve your insulin sensitivity. Eat more of these foods, and you're gonna see results quicker than you might expect. Now, a quick recap on what insulin resistance is and what causes it, because that's gonna help us to understand why I'm recommending these specific foods in this video. But if you wanna skip ahead to the foods, there will be timestamps on the progress bar. Insulin resistance is a state in which the cells in our body are no longer responding to insulin correctly. This happens when our insulin levels are high for an extended period of time, because one of insulin's main roles in the body is to regulate blood sugar. Usually when we eat, our blood sugar goes up and the pancreas releases insulin. The insulin then ushers the excess sugar out of the blood and into the cells. Except when we become insulin resistant, our cells stop accepting this blood sugar. This leads to insulin levels remaining high, eventually blood sugar levels remaining high as well. And this is when you're going to be diagnosed with prediabetes and eventually type 2 diabetes. But if you catch insulin resistance soon enough, you can stop it before it gets to that point. Some signs of insulin resistance include difficulty losing weight, skin tags in places such as your neck and your armpits, and excess abdominal fat. And insulin resistance starts years before your fasting blood sugar starts to rise. So even if you have had your blood sugar tested recently and it looks normal, if you have these signs, you still could be, and honestly likely are, insulin resistant. And this is why insulin resistance gets missed in the early stages, because doctors are routinely testing fasting blood sugar, but not our fasting insulin. So because insulin resistance is caused by high insulin levels, the key to reversing it is keeping your insulin low. When you keep your insulin low, your cells become more sensitive to it once again. And that leads to the topic of today's video: the best foods you can eat to reverse insulin resistance. Now, one last quick thing I'm going to talk about before we get into the list, and that is the insulin index. The insulin index is similar to the glycemic index, but instead of measuring the blood sugar response to food, it measures the insulin response to food. Now, in most cases, glycemic index and insulin index line up. Foods that spike blood sugar also spike insulin. And this makes sense because, like we said before, insulin is responsible for regulating blood sugar. So when blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up as well. But what we need to remember for the purpose of today's video is that the insulin index tests foods in isolation, which is rarely how we eat them. Combining foods or even eating them in a different order can significantly change our insulin response to them. And the other thing we need to take into consideration is the insulin index was formed on the basis of a high carb diet. The insulin response to eating the same foods if you typically eat a low carb diet is very different. All of that is to say that the insulin index might not be entirely accurate for every person in every context at least. I generally recommend a low carbohydrate diet for those who are looking to reverse insulin resistance, or at least being smart about carbs. And if you're eating a low carb diet or being smart about your carbs, then your insulin response to these foods that we're going to talk about in today's video is going to be low. But anyways, let's get into the list. So we're going to start off by talking about foods that are high in fat. And fat has next to no impact on our insulin levels. So these foods are great to include. Foods such as butter, ghee, olive oil, coconut oil, tallow, lard, sour cream, and heavy cream all have next to no insulin response. Fatty fruits such as avocado and olives also have a very minimal response. Eggs are another great option, and the yolks specifically, because they're a great source of not only healthy fats, but also fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, selenium, biotin, and a whole lot more. So they really are an all-around winner. Low insulin response and high nutritional value. Cheeses such as cheddar, blue cheese, and Parmesan also have only a very small insulin response. Certain nuts, including macadamia nuts, walnuts, and pecans, are also very low. Although I always like to make a disclaimer when it comes to nuts. They are one food that is very calorically dense, that is easy to overconsume. So if you have weight loss goals, this is just something to be mindful of. In general, I don't recommend tracking calories. If you use my framework for building meals for insulin resistance, which puts protein at the center, we'll get to protein in a second, then calories tend to fall into place. Now, when it comes to meat, bacon and pork in general, fish such as salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, and anchovies, and duck score the lowest on the insulin index. Turkey and chicken score a little bit higher, and beef and lamb slightly higher again. Now, once again, this isn't always applicable if you're eating a low-carb diet. In terms of vegetables, anything that's non-starchy and low in sugar is going to be the ideal. So we're talking broccoli, cauliflower, lettuce, garlic, green beans, onions, cucumber, zucchini, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, and mushrooms. Even though mushrooms are not technically a vegetable, I'm going to include them here. And then when we get into fruit, like I said, anything that's low in sugar. Strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, those are going to be the best. And of course, the fatty fruits, so things such as avocado and coconut, which we mentioned earlier. If the majority of your diet is made up of these foods, you're going to see improvements to your insulin resistance very quickly. Now, as I said at the start of this video though, what you eat is just as important as what you don't eat. So I'm going to be making a part 2 to this video talking about the foods you should avoid or at least limit as much as possible. Foods that cause a big spike in insulin and that can make your insulin resistance worse. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that video. I should have it out in the next couple days. And before you go, if you have a friend or a family member who you think could benefit from this video, maybe send it to them. But I want to hear from you guys. Which of these foods are you going to include in your dinner tonight? I challenge you to include at least one of them. And it shouldn't be that hard because, like I said, this is a pretty long list. You don't have to be super restrictive to see results in your insulin sensitivity. There are a lot of options. But anyways, guys, thank you for watching and I will see you next time. Bye.